Jeremy Youde, welcome to this In Conversation piece at Global Ideas Forum 2017.
Thank you for the invitation.
You've been a workshop presenter. Tell me, what message did you bring to the Global Ideas Forum crowd this weekend?
So my workshop was about global health governance in the Trump era. What do we do about this system that has developed over the past 25, 30 years that is now being called into question because the leader of the United States is someone who has expressed doubt about the value of giving money for global health and has expressed doubt about multilateral institutions. And the takeaway that I hope people got from the workshop is that there's reason to be concerned about this moment in global health governance. There are some real challenges facing us, but there are also some real opportunities. And the fact that there is a change in administration in the United States doesn't mean the end of global health governance. And so instead, what we need to do is think creatively about what other sorts of actors can get involved, how they can get involved, and what sorts of opportunities people like the people who are attending this conference can use to influence governments and try to put pressure on governments to keep this global health governance system going.
So you've mentioned actors. Let's explore that a little more, because not everyone in the crowd will know exactly what you mean by global health governance. So who are the key players and what is it that they do?
Sure. So when we're talking about global health governance, we're talking about dealing with these cross-border health issues on a number of different levels. So at the international level, we have groups like the World Health Organization and the UN AIDS and the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. These are these organizations that are largely bringing together governments to work on these sorts of issues. When we go down to the state level, then we're talking primarily about the donor states. So states like the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Australia, states that have been major financial contributors to various global health programs, but have also been important resources for human resources, providing the healthcare workers and the training that will be necessary. But we can even then take that down to a subnational level, even below the state, and look at the role of philanthropic organizations, look at the role of civil society groups like Doctors Without Borders that provide a lot of the first line response to the Ebola crisis in 2014 through 2016 in West Africa. And these sorts of groups can also play a big role. And so part of what's interesting about global health governance is that you've got this intersection between a lot of different actors who have various opportunities where they can make their mark, they can find a place to distinguish themselves. But it can also be challenging to coordinate among all those different groups because they may have different interests, they may have different things that they're particularly working on, or there may be turf battles that come up between those groups.
And so you've mentioned coordination, and Ebola is a good example here because health concerns don't respect national borders, and yet our governance is based around the unit of the nation state. So what mechanisms and tools do we have to manage that cooperation, and do you think it's working well?
I think this is this is a real inflection point within global health governance around that very issue, around the fact that most of our systems are based around states, but we have an increasingly non-state oriented system. And so there are learning curves that go along with this. And there are various growing pains that happen when there's any sort of change within a system like this. But I think we are starting to see these opportunities where states and civil society groups, for instance, are recognizing that they have complementary interests and that they can work together and figure out what sorts of strengths they can bring to this particular issue. So something like Ebola, in a lot of ways, the response was slow, and there's a lot to criticize about how the international community responded to Ebola. But at the same time, we did start to see some of the building of those connections between these civil society and these international organizations and national governments. And as we start to build those connections in one area, it makes it that much easier for it to happen in the next area, the next time we need to bring these groups together.
It seems to me that the world is really crying out for leadership on some of the grand challenges that we face, particularly in health, things like climate change. Where do you see this leadership coming from?
I think there is going to be I think we're going to see some new leaders emerging. I think traditionally the expectation has been that groups like the World Health Organization or the United States government or these sorts of actors will be the ones really to take the lead. But I think what we are witnessing now is that there are new groups that are starting to emerge, or at least a willingness for some of the other national governments and for some other organizations that maybe haven't traditionally had a super strong health focus, that this is a time where they have some sort of expertise that they can really bring to this. And so recognizing, much like the rest of this conference has, recognizing this holistic nature of global health, that it's not just a single issue, that it's going to have an effect on climate change and on issues of human rights and all of these other sorts of issues. I think organizations are starting to recognize that as well, and that's where some of this new and innovative leadership is going to come from, and can be inspiring in a way that some of the traditional leaders within this space maybe don't have the same sort of oomph. They don't attract the same sort of attention.
And just very quickly before we wrap, I hope that we've got a lot of next generation leaders in this audience. Do you have any advice for them?
I think that one of the most important things to do is just to start talking about these issues. One of the ways that we start to bring these issues to the forefront is to make them part of the discussion, to make them part of the political conversation, and to make them part of the political process. So just being engaged with these sorts of issues and making them part of the dialogue is going to be so incredibly vital.
Jeremy Youde, thanks for joining me in conversation at Global Ideas Forum 2017.
Thank you so much.